What? I haven't booked a flight for Harmony, of course not. This is a family trip. You, an older lady, should just go home and clean the house. If the house is dirty when we return, you'll truly be out of the family this time. I'm stunned by Nancy's words. I was looking forward to today's trip, coming all the way to the airport only to find out that my flight wasn't booked, and I can't go. I've put up with Nancy's unreasonable behavior for so long, enduring it because she's family. I've forgiven Nancy. I'm appalled that this is the result. I thought we were family, but it turns out I was the only one who thought so. Nancy clearly stated that she doesn't consider me family, so I should act accordingly towards someone who's not family. Alone, thoroughly, that's for sure. Deciding this, I went back home. My name is Harmony, a 64-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, Raymond. We have a son, Spencer, who married a few years ago and started his own family. This is the woman I want to marry. That's how Spencer introduced Nancy. They were colleagues at work, sporting and competing with each other since they got employed. Eventually, Nancy became an indispensable part of Spencer's life, and he decided to marry her. That was my first time meeting Nancy, a woman with a charming smile and a solid character. I thought she would be a good match for Spencer. I believed a new happy life was starting for them. Spencer and I, along with my husband, lived together. Spencer suggested it to support us in our old age, but it was the beginning of a tragedy. That day, I was enjoying a coffee break with Nancy. I served baked goods I received from a friend and made coffee. We chatted, but Nancy seemed dissatisfied. "This pastry isn't very tasty. Are you saying offering me this, Harmony?" After Nancy's command, I tasted the pastry myself. However, I found it delicious. It was from a renowned pastry shop known for its long queues. My friend had waited in line especially for me. There was no way it wasn't delicious. "If it doesn't suit your taste, I'm sorry. But this pastry is from a shop famous for its queues. My friend specially got it for me. It's unlikely to be bad." Indeed, I found it delicious, so I couldn't agree with Nancy's opinion of it being unpleasant. It was a perfect match with coffee and not too rich, making it easy to eat. That's why I got upset and confronted Nancy. "Are you challenging me, Harmony? That's brave. Who is it living here under whose roof? I can report to Spencer about your harassment." You know, I had no intention of harassing her. I merely stated the facts. Yet Nancy threatened to report me for harassment. Normally, I would have clearly stated such threats were wrong, but what if Spencer believed Nancy's words? The thought of him believing Nancy's lie about me harassing her scared me, and I couldn't say anything more. When I fell silent, Nancy seemed pleased and didn't say any more harsh words, continuing to enjoy the coffee break. I noticed Nancy eating more pastries than me, despite claiming they were untasty. By this time, our relationship had already gone awry. Not trying to fix it was proof of my cowardice. If I had reported Nancy's harsh words to Spencer or Raymond, then maybe the terrible outcome could have been avoided. But I was too afraid to break the family bond, so I did nothing and didn't even think of doing anything, even though I knew it would lead to a terrible result. Nancy's selfish actions didn't stop there. One day, she dressed up to go out. That itself wasn't a concern, but there were still household chores to be done. "I'm going out for tea with friends. Please handle the housework alone, Harmony." I was taken aback by Nancy's words. Originally, there was a rule about household chores. The rule was that Nancy and I, both housewives, would share the chores. Now, Nancy was about to break that rule. "Isn't that against the rules? We need to do our share of the chores properly." When I confronted her, Nancy puffed her cheeks in dissatisfaction and said, Can't you just not ruin my mood by saying unnecessary things? I'm about to go enjoy myself, but you're right. The housework isn't done yet." Today was my day to clean. But can you do it for me, Harmony? Please finish everything by the time I get back in the evening. If it's not done, there will be consequences. It was already past noon that day, yet I was expected to clean the entire house from that point, which was too much. Finishing it by evening was an unreasonable demand. That's impossible. There is no way I can finish everything by evening. I clearly told Nancy that it was unfeasible. However, my words seemed to upset her. Frowning, Nancy retorted, "Is that how a mother behaves? A mother-in-law should fulfill her daughter-in-law's whims. Doing the chores for me is part of your job as a mother-in-law, so please do your best with that. Nancy left the house, leaving behind a daunting task for me. I worked hard all day. It seemed Nancy had been neglecting her cleaning duties for the past few days, making it a tough job. Although it was difficult to finish by evening, I desperately managed to complete it. Just as Nancy was returning, Nancy seemed dissatisfied with it, but I was relieved it was over. I had been trying to get along with Nancy, enduring her unreasonable demands. Even when faced with an impossible challenge, I persevered and somehow managed to overcome it. Recognizing my effort, Spencer invited me on a trip. It was a vacation planned by Nancy, a 2-week stay in the Caribbean. We want to have a family trip, and we'll cover the expenses. How about it? Nancy's words made me feel that my efforts had been acknowledged. Without any objections, we agreed to the trip and prepared for our departure from America. On the day of the trip, we arrived at the airport with Spencer and his family. After checking the gate for our flight, I had a moment to relax. Let's have a great time on this trip. Looking forward to it, I spoke to Spencer and his family. I couldn't help but smile with anticipation. I was happy about going abroad, but more so that Nancy had planned a trip. It was surely going to be a wonderful journey. With this belief, I was startled when Nancy suddenly laughed. Did I say something funny? Puzzled, I tilted my head. And then Nancy dropped a bombshell. What? I didn't book a flight for Harmony. Isn't it obvious? This is a family trip. An unrelated older lady should just go home and clean. If the house is dirty when we return, I'll really kick you out of the family. I was shocked by Nancy's words. Not booked on a family trip flight? Wasn't this supposed to be a family vacation? No. Nancy had just excluded me from the family for petty reasons like being annoying or disliked. That realization brought a surge of indignation. So I devised a plan to make Nancy regret her actions. Understood then. I'll go back. I'll make sure the house is clean, so don't worry, I firmly told Nancy. The cold tension between us left Spencer and Raymond looking somewhat panicked. I had been silently enduring alone, but that ends today. As instructed by Nancy, I left the airport, but I hadn't given up on everything. I had a special plan in mind. To execute that plan, I returned home. Once home, I started cleaning as I was told. However, the cleaning was more thorough than usual on that day. I took care of various procedures first. I reserved a weekly rental apartment. Then, after having movers transfer all the furniture there, I thoroughly cleaned the house. I vacuumed the dust, mopped the floors, and even reapplied wax. If I was going to clean, it had to be done thoroughly. So thoroughly that it would be as if nothing had been there. Once the cleaning was done, I left the house and moved into the weekly rental. The next day, I visited a real estate agent. I decided to demolish the house and sell just the land. I completed the procedures for that. It seemed it would take about a week to demolish the house. Since Nancy and the others would return in 2 weeks, there wouldn't be a problem. I waited in the weekly rental, counting the days until the house would be reduced to land. A week later, I received confirmation that the house had been demolished as planned. I went to see the site where our house once stood. There, the land was completely cleared, with no trace of the house left. While I felt a twinge of sadness, my sense of satisfaction was greater. My preparation for revenge was complete. Now all I had to do was wait for Nancy's reaction upon realizing the current situation. During the remaining week before their return, I searched for a new house, anticipating their comeback. A week later, Nancy and the others were due to return. By then, I had already found a candidate for our new home and was just waiting to discuss it with Raymond. While relaxing at home, my mobile phone rang incessantly. I had a hunch who it might be from, but I checked anyway. It was Nancy. Hello, what's the matter? Honestly, dealing with her was a hassle, but my revenge wasn't over yet, and I was curious to hear her reaction to the state of the house. So, I answered the call. Nancy's voice was full of unusual tension, almost accusatory. What do you mean? What's the matter? Where are you? The house is a disaster. Come back quickly. It seemed they had already arrived home. They must have seen the barren site and called to ask me what had happened. I just cleaned it because you told me to. What's the problem with that? Did I do something wrong? I had merely cleaned. You told me to clean or else I would be punished, so I made sure it was spotlessly clean, leaving no trace behind. Yet here she was, angry at me, which was quite expected. Sure, I told you to clean, but I never said to go this far. Are you out of your mind? Everything is gone. We can't even live here now. Indeed, it was impossible to live there now. Nothing was left, just a vacant plot of land, and that land was already on the market, no longer ours. I cleaned because you told me to. If you're so unhappy with what I did, why don't you buy the land and build a new house, though? I doubt you and Spencer, who couldn't even live without relying on us, could afford to do that. Actually, our living together wasn't just about worrying for our old age. The truth was Spencer and Nancy were struggling financially. Spencer's salary was quite low. It was all due to the economic downturn. Until Nancy left her job to get married, Spencer's salary was decent. But then, a pandemic hit, leading to a recession, and his salary was significantly cut. That made it difficult for Spencer to sustain a living on his salary alone. Spencer had suggested Nancy find a job several times, but each time, my dream was to be a housewife. She refused, saying, in that situation, the only person Spencer could rely on was me. When I heard about their struggles, I immediately decided to live together. Living together would mean I'd pay the monthly $22,000 mortgage, easing their burden of rent. And honestly, we were financially comfortable, so I didn't plan to charge them for living expenses under the condition that they make efforts to improve their situation. We agreed to cover all their living expenses. That was the reason for our cohabitation. I had no idea about any of this. I never knew Harmony had so much money. I just assumed you were living off a pension, said Nancy. Indeed, what I did isn't something a normal person could do. $2,000 a month is a considerable amount, and only those with substantial financial means could afford it. Not to mention, I was also covering Spencer and his family's living expenses, which would amount to a significant sum. But I could afford it because, actually, my family runs that famous corporate group. My nephew is taking over now, but remember, my father passed away last year. We have more money than we can ever spend. Yes, my family has been chairing a well-known corporate group for generations. We are a family of wealthy individuals. From birth, I had access to a substantial amount of money. And after my father's death last year, I inherited a fortune that I couldn't possibly spend in a lifetime. That's not fair. Why didn't you tell us? We're family, aren't we? Hearing that I'm wealthy, Nancy yelled in panic. Why didn't I tell her? Because we're not family. After all the insults and disregard she showed me, her sudden change of attitude upon learning about my status was disgustingly selfish. Well, that doesn't matter now. What's important is I want to take Raymond with me. Can you stay there for a while? I'll come to pick you up. I did resent Nancy, but I felt sympathy for Spencer and Raymond, who were thrust into the situation without any consultation due to Nancy's selfish reasons. They, at least, had a right to live with me. Of course, their wishes would be the priority, but I needed to confirm their intentions. I hung up the phone and rushed to the side of our former house. When I arrived, Nancy and the others were waiting there. As I approached and said, "Sorry to keep you waiting," Nancy hurried towards me, pleading at my feet. "Please forgive me. I understand now that you are a remarkable person. Let's continue to live together, shall we? We're family after all." "Isn't it a bit harsh to abandon us over something like this?" Spencer concernedly asked. "Who was it that said we weren't family first?" Nancy, who had excluded me from the family, was now using the family card for her own preservation. It made me feel sick. "Weren't we not family? You didn't book a flight for me, did you? Leave me behind because we weren't family." Nancy had firmly stated we were not family when she didn't book my flight. But now, suddenly changing her tone to "we are family" was utterly deceitful. That was just a prank. Isn't it a bit narrow-minded to take it seriously? "I wasn't serious. Just a prank," Nancy attempted to explain. "Was that supposed to be a joke?" I asked, incredulously. When the family trip was proposed, I felt genuinely relieved. I was ready to forgive all the terrible things Nancy had done up until that point. But that trust was betrayed. Nancy herself betrayed my feelings. I couldn't just let it go as a mere prank. "I'm sorry, Nancy, but I can't forgive you, no matter how much you apologize. Even if it was just a prank, I never will." So please, give up, I said firmly. I just couldn't take it anymore. I had tried to be part of Nancy's family, endured being burdened with housework, and even tried to stay positive despite her complaints. And in return, Nancy betrayed me mercilessly. She made it clear at the airport that we weren't family. All my efforts were in vain. No matter how much I considered Nancy family, she never saw me the same way. It was a painful reality, a fact I wanted to turn away from. But I couldn't escape it. My heart couldn't bear it anymore. I've tried my best so far to live together as a family, to fully accept you, Nancy, but I can't do it anymore. So please, please give up, I said decisively. Upon hearing my words, Nancy slumped down. So this is it, she muttered, exhausted. Spencer, concerned, called out to Nancy, but she gave no response. Honestly, I thought it might bother the neighbors, but I had no intention of dealing with Nancy any further, so I decided to leave her there. After confirming their intentions, both Raymond and Spencer said they wanted to come with me. So, I got them into the car, planning to head to the weekly rental apartment, when Nancy, who had been dazed until then, rushed over with a desperate look. Please don't leave me behind. I can't do without you. If you leave me like this, she clung to me, begging, but my mind was made up. I had no intention of taking Nancy with me. I'm sorry, but please give up. I only want to live with Raymond and Spencer. You're not family, Nancy, so it makes no sense for us to live together. It's absurd to support someone who is not family or live together. I supported her because we were family. But now that we're not, it's a different story. There's no reason for me to do anything for Nancy anymore. I left Nancy there and drove away. She cried the entire time, but it was a consequence of her own actions, so it couldn't be helped. After that, Spencer decided to divorce Nancy, as expected. Nancy was against it, resisted, and refused to divorce. However, when Spencer hired a lawyer and took it to court, it was revealed that Nancy had been misusing the living expenses, and the divorce proceeded smoothly. Of course, the misused money was claimed as compensation in the divorce settlement. It turned out Nancy didn't have the means to pay, but Spencer was firm and demanded repayment. Nancy tried to return to her parents' home, but Spencer had informed them of her actions beforehand, and outraged by her unreasonable behavior, her parents disowned her. Apparently, Nancy has been kicked out of the house. Now she lives alone, working day and night to pay off the compensation. Meanwhile, the three of us, Raymond, Spencer, and I, are living happily. After discussing it together, we moved to a new house and now enjoy a relaxed life. The issue with Nancy escalated more than I imagined, and I still feel a bit sad about missing the family trip to make up for it. Spencer planned another trip to the Caribbean for us. I want to travel as much as possible while I'm still healthy. I'm endlessly grateful to Spencer for fulfilling my wish. As a mother, I want to support him fully so he can rebuild his life.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.